Okay, today my guest is Professor Anthony Goerzen. I'll keep my introduction short to maximize our time with him. In the next 30 minutes or so, we'll talk about Anthony as a person, Professor Goerzen as a thought leader and an esteemed scholar, and finally as a mentor to many PhD students and junior faculty. And for the sake of time, I'll skip many of his accomplishments and give you a very quick snapshot. Professor Goerzen's research is on the behavior and performance of multinational corporations, with a particular focus on location strategy and cooperative strategies. He also works on environmental sustainability, and his dissertation was recognized by European International Business Association and the Academy of Management. His research has been published in SMJ, JIPS, Journal of Management, Management International Review, Journal of International Management, Asia Pacific Journal of Management, Academy of Management Perspectives, among others. He has written several book chapters and many teaching case studies. Some of these cases are in Ivy Publishing's top 10 bestsellers. Thank you, Anthony, for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me.
First question, what did you want to become when you were a child?
Yes, I guess ever since I was a little boy, I've always wanted to be an international business professor at Queen's University in Kingston, Canada. In fact, I went to school just to learn my MNCs. No, you know what? I wish I had a better answer for you. I would say that when I was a kid, my strong suit wasn't focus. And I would say that it felt like the whole world was a bit of a black box. I've thought on many occasions, over the years, that I had no idea what was possible, whether to be a doctor or a fireman or an astronaut, or you could see some of these individuals around you, but I never really had, I don't think, any sense for how one goes about getting there. So I think that I would say that, my interest when I was a kid was riding my bike around, and I was very interested in basketball. I really loved playing football. So I'd say that I focused more on those things than any sense of a career.
And where did you grow up?
In Canada, in Southern Ontario. The city is called St. Catharines. It's near Niagara Falls.
And how did you choose academia?
Well, I'm a late bloomer as far as academia goes. I was in industry for almost 15 years before returning to get my PhD. I often thought that I loved school. I always loved school. I would say in the younger years, not so much. But as I grew older, and especially in university, I really enjoyed being in school. But then I guess my first job, I liked what I was doing. I was excited by the prospects of the company I was working for. I seemed to do well there. I was moving along career-wise, and then came to a point where I realized that I needed something different, and I felt that my business career was one where I was focused solely on making money for the company and for myself, and found that it didn't have this sense of, I guess, of purpose that I felt I needed. And in addition to that, it might sound a little bit, I don't know what this sounds like, but when Michael Jordan, the great basketball player, he quit basketball in I think it was the early 94, something like that. And he wanted to play basketball. He wanted to do something else. And so he went to go play baseball for a year and didn't do very well. I mean, he couldn't make the majors. He was in a minor league, and eventually he quit, went back to basketball. And that had kind of an impact on me at that time, because I realized that in my career, I was no Michael Jordan of the business world. I'm not saying that by any stretch. But what I'm saying is that I was involved in a certain activity. I was getting perhaps better at it. I was getting deeper into it. And I sort of perceive that at some point, I won't be able to move. It's sort of like the notion of golden handcuffs. And so there was a pivotal moment where I suddenly decided that I was going to pursue I could call it my dream. It was something that I had talked about a lot. I had sort of envisioned getting back into academia. And then one day it just seemed like it's now or never. And it seemed like a great idea. I had support from my family, and we sold everything actually, and loaded up the car, and I went back to school. And just in terms of your question, I think you were asking about IB. The notion of whether to be an IB scholar versus any other kind was never really a debate for me. It was never a question. Ever since I can remember, I was always interested in international issues. Even as a young child, I remember thinking about foreign places and foreign countries and I was particularly interested in other cultures, particularly cultures that were very different from mine. I always did a lot of reading. I was excited by that topic. The various jobs that I had in my career in industry were all very much international, with international customers, international suppliers, a lot of travel. And it was that really kept me going for the 15 years that I was in industry. I would say it was the international component that always kept me really engaged and excited by what I was doing. So when it came time to choose a stream or a discipline, it seemed that the shortest distance for me, or a way that I could use some of my experiences or knowledge in a practical sense, was strategic management, because that was more or less my job when I was in industry, particularly towards the later years. And again, the notion of international has always been really interesting and really important to me. So it wasn't this sort of debate about where I should go. It was like, I'm going into academia. I'm going to go into international business with a focus on strategy.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Anthony, if you could do it all over again, would you follow the same path? Would you do exactly what you did, or would it?
Yeah. Well, I guess there's a million forks in the road that I wish that I had, had more awareness of, where I was going, what I was doing. Frankly, I would say that, especially now, given how much I've really embraced academia and really enjoy my work as a researcher and as a teacher, a mentor, sometimes I wonder whether, should I have gone into academia sooner? Many of my colleagues, I think it's very common to have worked for, 3 years, 5 years, and then you dive into academia, and that's where your career is. But I stayed, outside for many more years. And sometimes I wonder whether I might have been able to make a greater impact had I had, started 5-10 years earlier. So that's a thought. Although, I can't say that I really second guess. The choices that I made were the right ones for me at the time. And whereas I think now there might have been certain choices that I could have made that might have, added something here, but they would have taken something away from there. So on balance, I'm not really sure that I would change much, if anything, but that might be one to maybe start sooner, I would say.
Perfect. Something that is not on your CV that people might find interesting about you.
Well, I can't speak for them as to whether they'll find it interesting, but something that's not on my CV is that I'm trying to learn how to paint. I'm trying really hard, actually, to learn how to paint. And I'm absolutely captivated by painting, and I'm interested in, I've taken a particular interest in abstract landscapes. And so I'm finding that it's really been something that painting is something that opens your eyes, I have found. And I've heard other people say this, that painting, like photography, it's about seeing. And when you look at some of the sort of famous work that's been done, or even, not necessarily famous work, but some of the artists who are really kind of accomplished, the way that they can look at a scene and what they highlight, and it really is a fascinating thing. And in addition to that, I would say that it has really improved or enhanced my awareness of color. Whereas, at one time, I would say, you look at a tree and you see green, or you look at the water and you see blue. But in fact, it's not green and it's not blue. In fact, there's different colors, sometimes that are not even in the green range, that make up the illusion of a green tree. And it's really quite fascinating to see how some people, particularly in the realm of abstract landscapes, how people go about representing those what they see, because you're not trying to create you're not trying to create a representation. You're not trying to create a copy. You're trying to create a feeling, right? And how do you go about creating that feeling when you look at a landscape is really interesting. As I said, it really captivated me, and I'm trying to learn how to do that.
How serious is this? It's not a hobby, obviously, for you, but how serious is this for you? How many hours do you dedicate to painting a week?
Well, I would say, I would say probably not more than 5 or 6, probably not more than that. So often, in an evening, I'll do maybe 2 hours. I find it absolutely exhausting. For me, it is absolutely exhausting to paint. I find that I'm so kind of drawn into what I'm trying to do that that, as I say, for me, I've heard of people painting all day. I don't know how they do it. But for me, about 2 hours is about the most I can really manage. And I'll try that twice, 3 times a week, something like that.
Interesting.
But in terms of how serious, or, if you were to make an offer right now, you might get a better deal on one of my paintings now. Maybe for the cost of materials, even.
Okay, what did you learn from your biggest failure or biggest mistake?
Yeah, I would say in academia, I think, well, gosh, how long do we have? I think I could talk about my failures for if you have a few days. But in terms of academia, I would say, well, I think there are many failures, frankly, but one that really stands out to me, and I'm still trying to learn from even today, happened maybe 20 years ago. It was, I had a manuscript that I had submitted to AMJ, and I made it through to the third review, and it got rejected. And I know why it got rejected. The reason being is because I think I had not learned humility in the way that I needed to. I felt that, I don't know, the best way I think I can put it is that I was trying to prove the reviewers wrong. They had an idea about what should be and what shouldn't be, or how to, what things should look like. And I resisted, and I fought back. And I realized that I scuttled my that opportunity to publish an AMJ, which was really disappointing for me. But I realized that that was a life lesson for me in a number of different ways. One has to do with the notion of humility, that you kind of, sometimes when you spend a lot of time on something, you kind of think you know everything, and you don't. You don't know everything. I don't know everything. So that was something that I needed to maybe be reminded of. And the other thing has to do with I think the craft of publishing, which is that when you submit an article, I need to relinquish control to a certain extent. not kind of abandon control, but it becomes, in a way, a partnership with the editor and with your reviewers. And to listen carefully, to listen respectfully. It's really easy to get frustrated when they don't accept some of the ideas that I had that in this article. They didn't accept the way that I was characterizing a certain theory and what I was highlighting and what I was downplaying. They didn't accept that, and I think that what I should have done is been much more open. And I think that for me, those two ideas, the notion of humility and the notion of working with people, not against them, I think were two life lessons that I would trace back to that AMJ, that painful AMJ review that I went through that led ultimately in rejection after the third round.
Where did that paper go to after?
Yeah, well, it made it to, it sort of got into SMJ, and which is very, I mean, great. I mean, just as great. But it was just the way it was done, and my role in that was the thing that really was something that I felt I needed to really take to heart. And I remember thinking that at the time, I need to take this to heart.
How do you explain your research, and why is it important to people who don't read academic journals, to laymen? What does your research do?
Yeah. I think the best way that I explain it, if somebody were to ask, is that there's a strong and growing sense that business needs to account for more than profits. But instead there's a rising awareness that social and environmental issues need to be addressed by everyone, not just government and not just non-governmental organizations. It was Anita Roddick, who, the founder of The Body Shop, said many, many years ago now, that there is no institution, not religion, not government, that is stronger, that is faster, that can turn on a dime than business. And that it has to have now, in this day and age, a sense of moral responsibility for what's going on around. So the research I'm working on with my PhD students relates to the ways and means by which managers can move the needle on social and environmental issues within their own global value chains. And if that explanation hasn't already cleared the room, I would go on to say that I don't think there is a single strategic management course anywhere that doesn't have as one of the core learning goals has to do with know your competitive advantage, leverage your key resources and capabilities, understand your core competence. All of these ideas are ones that focus inwards. Who are we? What are we good at? And how do we leverage that? But the direction I think that the world is going in is that there are a number of very important things that are going on that relate to social and environmental issues. And as we ask business to take on more, we're in some sense going against that notion of stick to your knitting, of know your core competence, of leverage your competitive advantage. We're asking them, no, get out of your comfort zone, start understanding some of these other issues and get involved in them and learn how you can play a role. So I think that we're at, I would say, a paradigm shift, I think, in international strategic management, where we are asking managers to do something that is fundamentally different than what they've been doing in the past.
So, Anthony, let's talk about forgotten variables, forgotten concepts in IB, the next steps for the next 5 to 10 years of the field, and maybe tie it to your research with the award paper. What is missing in the literature?
I would tie it on to that last answer. So in my view, I think what's missing has to do with the notion of how do we bring in social and environmental issues into our concept of business unit strategy. I think at this moment, it isn't clear at all. And, there often is this sense that managers are greenwashing, and they're, this sort of, it's like there's something devious and underhanded. I don't believe that for a second. In all of the managers that I've ever talked to, and I know myself when I was a manager, really wanting to do the right thing, but it's not clear on how to do the right thing, or who should do the right thing, or how should that be done. So, in my view, the world, I think, is on fire in a number of ways. And I think that it's all hands on deck to address some of the social issues that I think represent an existential threat to capitalism, and environmental issues that represent an existential threat to humanity. So I don't think that we can be huddled away in our own areas. I think that we, as I said a moment ago, I think it's all hands on deck. We need to figure this out and understand how can we actually make a dent in some of the issues, some of the major, large looming issues, climate change, so many issues that we need a much greater understanding of. So what variables are missing? I think ones that relate to those issues.
Anthony, you painted a picture, a very positive picture for the type of manager that we're talking about. But isn't it different than the Knightian manager, the Goerzen, the Williamsonian, even Spence's signaling gaming style? The concept of agency is giving birth to these type of people acting in guile. So is this a new evolution? The changing culture in IB, changing culture in strategic management, or in other words, is the manager of the old times different than the manager of the new times?
Absolutely, it has to be. And I know when I teach my master's students in global strategy, I tell them that there has to be a new way. We have to, and as I said a moment ago, we don't know what that way is yet. But that is our role as scholars, as researchers, to understand what that new way is. How can we provide guidance to managers, to NGOs, to policymakers on what that new way is? But I don't believe that it's business as usual. I think that there are issues that are looming that are so important. And meanwhile, I think many of us are, there's the cliche about rearranging the deck chairs in the Titanic. It's this notion of you're spending time working on something that just doesn't matter because you're about to hit an iceberg. So, I think that I think the manager of tomorrow, in fact, the manager of today, I think is already changing. And if it's not changing, I think that in itself is a real problem in itself, for sure.
Okay. Who had the most impact on your intellectual development? Who was your mentor?
Well, Paul Beamish was my advisor, so he certainly set me on a path, and has been a fantastic supporter and mentor for me throughout my career, even to the present day.
What was the best advice you received from Paul?
Yes. Well, I do recall him talking to me about the idea that we were talking about before about the AMJ rejection. I remember him mentioning that to me at the time also. So I'm a slow learner, obviously.
And every rejection hurts even now. After
No kidding. No, absolutely.
What do you see as the biggest challenge in front of junior faculty or PhD students, as far as the biggest mistakes that they make constantly? What would you say? Do this or don't do this? What is the advice?
I think that perhaps the number one skill that a scholar needs, it has to do with people management, understanding how to work with people, and faculty, other researchers, reviewers, they are all a lot like people, and they behave just like people do. And I think that notion of trying to understand how to work with people, how to work through them, to collaborate with them, I think is an essential skill that is, building your network, which is the ways that you can provide, fabulous, all the opportunities that I've had to travel, to do research, to get in all, it's because I have tried fairly consciously to build my social network. So I think that is something that I encourage my PhD students. Every time you go to a conference or any kind of research meeting, come away with at least one person that you now consider to be a colleague, somebody that you can call on, that you can talk to, that you can email, you can share information with. And start slowly and keep building your social network, because I think that's where, that's the spice of it. I think, that's the exciting part for, surely it's about publishing and whatnot, but I think to be part of a community, to be sharing ideas, to be developing, to be building towards something, I think is really kind of the spice of academia. So that would be, the thing I know that I try to impress upon my PhD students for sure.
Is this the same thing for mid-career or assistant professors as well?
Yeah.
Is this the advice that you will give to not PhD students, but a bit older?
Yeah, no, I would. The thing though that occurs to me is that for people skills, my sense is if you didn't learn it in kindergarten, maybe you will never learn it. I think it's something that comes very early in life, your ability to relate to people and to work with people, make people feel included, make them feel valued, make them feel that you are trying to get them where they want to go. I think those are skills that a manager, or at any level, a scholar at any level, any stage in their career would definitely benefit if they have those kinds of skills.
Last question for the sake of time. What's the question I should have asked you but haven't?
I think it's the question should be, could you buy me a beer at AIB Warsaw?
Okay.
I still haven't heard the question.
Can I?
Sure.
Yeah. Perfect. So are you going to AIB?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now you're on the hook.
Of course, it would be a pleasure.
Yeah.
Anton, thank you very much for your time. Is there anything that you need to get off your chest before we hang up?
No, it's all good. I appreciate your doing this, and I hope it provides some value.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
All right. Bye for now.